Hey everyone, Dr. Frunky here with a really awesome new unboxing video for you on some new knives from a new maker. This is going to be a set of knives from Grind Tactical Knives, or GT Knives. He sent along some of these cards. His real name is Thomas Gony. You might pronounce it as Thomas Gony if you're from America. But he is in France, and these are his contact informations. He has a website, he has Instagram, he has a Facebook group, and he openly wants people to reach out to him and talk to him about his knives. And so I'm really happy to present this to you guys for a number of reasons. Number one, recently I've been getting into front flippers. It really all started with the Chamois way back in the day. I've been loving the Chamois. Later on, I got to experience some Philippe Georget work. I have this CKF 523 right here that is among the very best front flippers on the market right now. And in continuing with this trend of looking at front flippers and then looking into French knives, I came across some other makers, namely David Lespect. Now, I don't have any videos on his knives as of yet. I hope that changes sometime in the near future. David Lespect has become very hot recently. You can see some videos from our good French friend Sylvie, as well as Eugene Kwan on some of his knives. He was very popular at the Blade Show, so in learning about David, I learned about his next door neighbor, who happens to be Thomas, or Thomas. Thomas has studied under David, and he has learned how to make his own style of knives, and I'm going to present to you guys the SPEARTAC front flipper, his folding knife model. But before I get into these knives, and just to put all of this into perspective, I'm going to show you this bead. He sent along this bead, which could not be more perfect to explain the handicap that Thomas is working with at a baseline. Thomas suffers from spinal muscular atrophy. What this is, it is a genetic defect in which a protein is coded incorrectly, and it causes early degeneration of the nerves that go from your spine into your muscles. And so it leaves a lot of people with varying degrees of handicaps. And Thomas is actually restricted to a wheelchair. He's unable to walk on his own easily, and it does affect his upper arms slightly as well, just not to the same extent. And so Thomas has modified his own workshop there in France so that all of his machinery is 20 inches off of the ground, so that he can wheel around in his specialized wheelchair and still make these knives 100% by hand in the true French handmade fashion, which is just mind-blowing that this guy is doing it. And now I'm going to show you the knives, and you're going to be even more impressed. So it's been already 3 minutes, and I haven't even shown you a knife yet. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the first one that I got. So this is the SPEARTAC front flipper with a modified Wharncliffe blade shape. The original SPEARTACs featured a spearpoint style blade, but his most recent grinds have been these Wharncliffe, the MWC. So you'll see on the Certificat d'Authenticité that it is a SPEARTAC Wharncliffe with RWL 34 blade with an acid finish, marble carbon fiber, and custom pivot screws, signed by Thomas right here, made in June of 2019, which is just a few weeks ago. I saw this knife for sale on his Instagram, and I messaged him, and I picked it up for a very reasonable price, less than $600 for this custom handmade knife featuring all of those materials, and we'll get into the details. A few days later, however, I was still looking at his page, and he showed this knife. And you're about to see why I had to immediately purchase this knife, and you can see it right there. Yes, indeed, this is a SPEARTAC Integral. This is a single piece of titanium as the handle. This is the second integral knife that Thomas has ever done. And so I messaged him and I said, "Sir, is that knife for sale?" And as you can see here, integral number 2, also with RWL 34 and a 6AL4V or a titanium frame, TA6V, and then with also custom pivot screws. And this one was made a little bit earlier this year, but was not immediately available for sale. I'm going to move the rest of this stuff off of the screen so we don't fight with the focus during the video here. But we're going to start out by talking about the original knife here. This is the SPEARTAC Wharncliffe. Thomas's inspirations came from the high-end production knives of recent years. Thomas has been a fan of knife making for a few years, and he got into it by following the likes of Zero Tolerance. Zero Tolerance at that time were making highly tactical, specialized knives with an overbuilt quality to them. And I think that that company and that sort of style language in particular spoke to Thomas. And in living next door to a custom knife maker and obviously being friends with some of the others, and he is definitely a knife nut, it inspired him to start making his own knives. And a few years ago, he started doing that. And for only a couple of years now, he's been making folding knives. And so it's super exciting to see how far he has come. I think that in the grand scheme of things, he is not one of the most legendary French makers. He's not quite at the level of the Philippe Georget or Lespect or some of these other very high-end guys. But he's young and he's learning and he's very passionate about what he's doing. And he's got some very special techniques that I think are going to gain him some very strong notoriety, some popularity, I'll call it, very even popularity. So let's go ahead and get into the details on these knives. As you can immediately tell, these are actually two different sizes. The Integral is a little bit smaller with a 3-inch blade, and the carbon fiber one here has a 3 1/4-inch blade. Both are in RWL 34. I'll pull out the ruler here so you can see the rest of the measurements. For my French friends, that means that this blade is coming in at about 80 millimeters and the bigger one at about 85 to 90 millimeters, something like that. The handle here is coming in at 105 millimeters, aka 4.1 inches. And on the carbon fiber version, you are looking at about a 4 1/4 inch on the handle, aka 110 millimeters. Not used to doing the conversions right there, so I hope that that satisfies some of these guys. We'll take a look at some of the widths right here. The blade stock on the carbon fiber is coming in at 150 thousandths on the dot. On the smaller Integral, it's 136 thousandths, so it slims down appropriately, as I would hope in a smaller knife. What I do like about integrals is that it sometimes allows you to have a very narrow handle. This is coming in at 0.394 right here. That's at the thinnest part, about 0.43 inches at the thickest part. So very, very thin on the handle, under ½ inch right there. The carbon fiber liner lock version is coming here at 0.53, just over ½ inch in terms of thickness. These are both just incredible knives. I really enjoy just looking at them. I really enjoy the overall visual aesthetic. I think that they have a very unique look with the fuller and this blade shape. Let me bring out another couple of knives for a quick size comparison. Here is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, which is significantly larger than both of these knives. And then I'll go ahead and put the Para 3 right here because that's kind of where it's going to slot in the grand scheme of things. It's about the same size as this full-size one and a little bit bigger than the smaller one. So very nice EDC sizes. These knives in the photos look very imposing and look like they're huge knives, but they are in fact rather small knives, and that is super, super nice. So I'm going to move the Integral off the screen. We'll focus for a minute on the finish work and the features of this carbon fiber version, and we'll break it down anatomically. Up front is that blade of RWL 34 done in a very unique acid wash. Generally, RWL is known for its high polish capability and high corrosion resistance. It's not often that you see someone acid etch RWL. In fact, in Damasteel, RWL is supposed to be the stainless or non-etching steel. So it's very unique to see someone etch RWL like this, and he has achieved a very uniform, very nice finish. I actually enjoy it. I'm typically not a fan of acid wash, but this one looks very nice. It's very homogeneous, very clean. The blade profile itself is so cool looking. The sweeping, traditional Wharncliffe style sweeping down like this, the flat blade and the fuller are just incredible. And yes, that fuller is absolutely as functional as you hope it is. It falls right there on the backside so you can get your finger in there and flick that knife out really, really nicely, which was a huge win when I realized that I could do that. That makes this knife so much more fidgetable and a whole lot more fun to play with. And of course, that is also applicable on the integral version. I enjoy that this has a little divot right here for the thumb that's reminiscent to me of some of my other favorite makers. Rob Carter comes to mind, but it allows you to kind of sneak your thumb up and put your thumb right there for some push cutting. There's also an upward ramp to the thumb ramp right there, very Terzula-esque right there. And so you're able to put your thumb on that ramp and have application of pressure in this direction. There is an interesting cutaway right here. There's an interesting choil right here, the way that he's chosen to do the sharpening choil and the plunge grind and everything. It allows you to sneak your finger up so you can put your thumb here and your finger here and have control of the blade. You can have your finger here, you can have your finger here. It allows for a lot of ergonomic options. Perhaps this area could be perfected slightly over time, but I think that it provides for some excellent options for overall use. Moreover, it works very well for the sort of over-the-top grip like this, where I put my finger on the blade and do draw cuts. It's very comfortable for that as well. Really love the Wharncliffe blade shape as an overall user-style blade shape, and the way this one is done is beautiful. It's done with a flat grind. I'm trying to show you how thin it is behind the edge, super thin. Beautifully ground. This thing is flat ground all the way from the top, and then there's just a top swedge. It's a full flat grind, just swedged right here. There's a little flat right here, so it's maybe an 80% flat grind. Excuse me. Moving back to the pivot, this guy is running on ceramic ball bearings with a ceramic detent, and it is every bit as smooth as you would hope it would be. As you can see, the blade flies out of the handle and it drops shut at the slightest little shake. And this is still a very new knife that is needing some breaking in, and it is ultra smooth. The detent is tuned perfectly so that I can flick the knife or I can front flip it like that. Moving back to the handles on this one, it features some beautiful marbled carbon fiber. There's a marbled carbon fiber backspacer that's cross-cut, so it looks like the Blackwood style. Obviously, the scale is on this side with bronze anodized titanium liners and bronze anodized handmade pivot hardware. Take a look at that. Super cool. Very good looking. Let's take a look at the integral now. This one is probably even more impressive. We'll break this one down anatomically. This blade is done also in RWL 34, this time with a hand rub satin. Hand rub takes a lot of time and effort, and in someone that has upper extremity weakness, I can only imagine that it's that much more difficult. And so quite amazing to see how perfectly done he has achieved this. Beautiful finish on this blade right here. Really love this finish. It brings out all of the different facets of the blade itself. The top swedge shines. The fuller is done in a matte finish for a nice contrast. And everything is nice and smooth on there. Absolutely beautiful. Again, this one is a bit smaller, but all of the same ergonomic considerations are there. So what actually happens, I really love when a small knife provides some excellent options for my hand, because I have a larger hand, so it's nice to have options on how to grip a smaller knife so that I can choke up a little bit. I can get a full hand grip on this very small 3-inch knife and have very perfect control over it. I really like that. The pivot hardware on this knife is slightly different. A little bit more bulbous on this one, but also custom made with the 3 dots on there. This one also runs on ceramic ball bearings, and as you can see, detent is perfectly tuned. Just as a full disclosure moment, when I got this knife in particular, if I would push on the lock bar, the detent ball would get stuck in the detent hole. So I sent it back to Thomas, and he fixed it in 15 minutes and shipped it back to me. So his service was immediate. The knife was gone less than 7 days, and really quite an impressive turnaround right there to ship it internationally. And now it's 100% perfect. If I push on it, there's no problem. Absolutely great action. I can vouch not only for the quality of his knives, but if there is a problem, I can now 100% vouch for his ability to correct the problem. Moving back to the handle on this one, ultra impressive here. One single piece of titanium, integral handle. This is particularly difficult to do by hand. It's one thing if you have a CNC machine that can perfectly mill out the inside here. Some people argue, why is an integral so special? What makes an integral more expensive? In fact, this small knife was nearly double, actually it was almost exactly double the price of this piece right here. What makes this one double the price of that other one? It has to do with the difficulty of doing this by hand. A sandwich style knife, a regular style knife, much like this carbon fiber model, is made by two liners that are put together with some carbon fiber. Each of these pieces have to be made flat, and then they can be put together. If there is some minor variation, perhaps that is worked out by the other layers being flat and then cinching it all together with the screws. Some of those things can be evened out in that way. However, when you make an integral, you have to mill this line in absolute perfect straightness. And so it requires a very steady hand and other techniques that I can't even begin to explain to you because I'm not a knife maker. But what I can say is you get one try at doing this and you'd better do it right, and there is less room for imperfections, and other things won't correct for the slight variations in flatness or straightness. And so it certainly requires a perfect hand in order to do something like this, where you have an integral knife and it's absolutely dead centered with perfect action, perfect detent, perfect blade retention, and perfect straightness. It's just extremely nice and extremely impressive to be coming from him to be handmade. So just posting this knife alone, number 2 integral on my Instagram, garnered him about 10 more orders for upcoming integrals. And so you will be seeing more of these coming out of his feed, so pay close attention to what he's doing. A lot of those are going to be orders and not necessarily available, but I have a feeling that he'll be starting to make them more available for people as he can. This features a rather standard pocket clip, which is a welcome change from a lot of the other French makers. Many of the other French makers don't like using pocket clips. All of Thomas's models, from what I've seen, do have pocket clips, and I really appreciate that. They're rather simple, but they work just fine. They're not overly tight. There's enough ramp. If I could make a small complaint, this one is a little bit short and right next to the lock bar cutout, and so it's not perfect for going in and out of the pocket, but there's enough spring to it that it allows it to function okay. This one works perfectly sitting on top of the flat carbon fiber scale. This one works even better, but that is a rather minor complaint in the overall grand scheme of things. Now, there are some minor details that you will notice on a knife like this that is handmade by a guy that's relatively new in the knife game. Like, maybe take a look. Some of this jimping is not 100% symmetrical and perfectly even all the way down. That was true here. I actually showed this to him in some pictures, and he said he just needs to work on the fixture for making his jimping, and he can correct that. And so it was helpful for him to have that constructive feedback. Again, I mentioned that there was a small detent problem that was rather easily fixed. And so it's important to understand that Thomas is an up-and-coming knife maker. He's young and he's very ambitious, and he has some very awesome models and some very amazing inspirations. I don't think I've seen another front flipper integral out there, one that was designed to be a front flipper. Someone mentioned the Microtech Anax was almost a front flipper, but it really wasn't. This is meant to be a front flipper. That one was meant to be a little bit of a more stiff action. This one is a very smooth and fast action. So extremely exciting work coming out of France. This is going to be the first in a series of French knives that I intend to acquire over the next few months and share with you guys. Some of these makers are really incredible, and they are overlooked by the broader American knife culture, and I have had my eyes opened to the reality at the Blade Show 2019, and I look forward to looking into some of these makers and sharing this stuff with you guys. So let me bring out the contact information here for Grind Tactical Knives and Thomas Gony so that you guys can be in touch with him. If you're interested in a knife from him, reach out. I'm not sure if he's taking orders. I think he may be right now. So if you're interested in a SPEARTAC, let him know. I'm sure he'd be proud to make you a knife. I'm proud to own this. As a doctor and as a neurosurgeon, it strikes very close to home to have someone with a neurological condition making these kinds of knives. It really is the crossing of my two life hobbies and also of his, and so I feel like I have a special connection with this guy, Thomas. We've had some great conversations. He's an extremely humble and kind human being, and I could not give him a stronger endorsement. I really look forward to see how he grows as a knife maker, and I hope that you guys can encourage him by buying some of his knives. So go and check out his work, and thank you guys for watching. Go ahead and click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel here. Go and follow me on Instagram as Dr. Frunky. Help support me through the Dr. Frunky Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Frunky. And as always, guys, take care.